Welcome to InTouch, dedicated to real estate professionals worldwide. We're here to educate you, entertain you, and empower you in all facets of real estate. Are you ready for the latest news, trends, and market updates? Then it's time to get in touch. Welcome back to the show. Today we've got a special episode, and this is practical application on step 3. Essentially, it's a summary of step 3 in action. You know, you can receive a lot of information, but unless you apply that information, you will never see the transformation in your business. So that's what today's episode's all about. What are the action items revolving around the appointment, which is step 3? Now, as we prepare to move you into step 4, which is the presentation, I just want to re-clarify for our listeners that step 3 is a separate appointment. Remember, step 1 is the initial contact, step 2 is the follow-up, and step 3 is the appointment where you qualify the prospect, get to know their needs, and then make a decision whether you will move into step 4, which is the presentation. So many times we see people skipping over the appointment and jumping right into the presentation, which is a mistake. Now let's recap step 3, and we'll go line item by line item with some action items to get you started. I am joined today in the studio with Gary Giffin. Gary, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andrew. Great to be here.
All right, so let's dive into these action items. Number 1, focus on your state of being before you arrive. This means being in a joyful mood, having a positive mental attitude, and showing up with a presentable personal appearance, whether it is an in-person or virtual conference. Face-to-face appointments are preferred. Now let's dive into this because in today's world, virtual conferences are becoming more and more popular. And that's all well and fine. But I do see people showing up in the equivalent of their pajamas and their hair's not brushed and they're looking, disheveled. And here they are trying to present, right? So what are your thoughts? I mean, face-to-face, as I mentioned, is preferred. That's what we desire. But a lot of clients are busy these days, and they prefer the virtual conference. So everything from your background to the clothes you're wearing to your appearance, your emotional intelligence, your body language, all this is important. What do you do when you have to do virtual conferences, and how do you prepare when you are face-to-face with clients?
Well, Andrew, I do have my favorite pajamas, but I do not wear them in Zoom or out of the house. Like I see a lot of people. I almost spit out my coffee when you said pajamas. It's just funny because people think that's acceptable, right? So yeah, no pajamas, no onesies. Let's stay away from that. For me, since I've been with this company and Andrew created a great logo years ago. We put them on T-shirts and we put them on nice golf shirts. And now he's created another fantastic logo. So I tend, since I'm a big guy, I like to wear things where people can see where I'm from or what company I'm with. So I like wearing a logoed shirt. And you don't really have to think about it, right? If you're challenged on how to pick out clothes, you get a white shirt, get a black, golf shirt, whatever, and pair that up with some nice slacks or pants. Make it easy for yourself. A lot of these Zoom meetings are early in the morning, but you still have to dress professionally. Don't go into the bathroom during those meetings. Stay focused on the objective. Make sure that you're smiling. Don't jump around. Stay on camera. Don't turn your camera on and off. I'm saying a lot of things here that should be common sense, but I see it all the time, and I know so Andrew does also. So, wear something nice and clean, and look presentable. Comb your hair. Brush your teeth. Pretend you're at a face-to-face meeting when you're on a Zoom meeting, because that's important. You're presenting yourself to other people that may not have seen you before. So, sorry, that a lot of common sense there, but I had to interject.
It's great. And that's the practical application piece. And that's exactly what we're talking about. Simple things like the background. You can blur out your background. You can replace the background. You don't have to do some of the ridiculous backgrounds that they have as templates. I think it distracts the person. the subject, the focus of the meeting should be whoever's on the other side. Now, what the client does, that's up to them. That's not your issue. It's you as the professional that have to decide. We've chosen a very standard black background. So that way, whoever's speaking, the subject is in focus and there's not distractions. I see all the time people have stuff going on in the back, and the person who's on the other end can't help but watch whatever's happening in the background because it's frankly just distracting. So take a moment and get your virtual appearance in place. And for the face-to-face appointments, as Gary suggested, is your car clean? Are you dressed professionally? Does your breath smell? I mean, all these little things make a first impression. They sound like common sense. You do want to find your place where it's natural and it's not coming off as this is my personality on the first appointment, and then I'm somebody else on appointment 2, 3, and 4, right? So do find what's comfortable for you. Don't overdo it. At the same token, be conscious that you are going to be judged for better or for worse, especially with new relationships that you don't know. Okay, number 2, focus on your client's needs using emotional intelligence throughout the appointment. And we do have resources, books you can read. You can find them online. But Gary, let's talk just for a minute about emotional intelligence, because a lot of people misinterpret that for maybe body language or just don't have a clear understanding of emotional intelligence. Why don't you share a little bit about it?
Well, yeah, when you're meeting somebody face to face, the key there is, and you mentioned it before, is to listen to the client. I have a hard time doing that because I'm always thinking of what I'm going to say, and I try not to interrupt people. But emotionally, you have to be in the right headspace. You already know your presentation because you've done it many times, but you want to be in a great attitude, and that's going to carry that conversation on throughout the time that you're spending with that client.
Yeah, being empathetic to where they're at, their emotional state. You have to be careful. If you really master this rule, you turn into a psychologist, right? And you don't want to go there. But the point is, if you can understand where they're at emotionally, you are going to be able to help them. And emotions are what drive behavior. Emotions typically are the driving force behind somebody pursuing a transaction. Even though it's a business thing, it's driven by emotion. And then number 3, let's take a look at this. During the appointment, follow the golden rules of face-to-face communication. And we'll go over those golden rules in just a moment here. But speak professionally. Improve your word choices by expanding your vocabulary. And then ask the right questions using concise questionnaires during an appointment. There's nothing wrong with bringing a physical questionnaire with you. You don't have to memorize it and have it all figured out. Most people are used to, when they're going through a new transaction process, having to fill out some form. You can do it yourself and use the form itself to guide the conversation so that you don't get off track. So again, number 3, follow the golden rules of face-to-face communication. We'll go over those in just a minute. Number 4, speak professionally. Improve your word choices by expanding your vocabulary. And number 5, ask the right questions using concise questionnaires during an appointment. So Gary, why don't you speak to that, about those word choices, about those questionnaires? How do you do it to make sure the conversation stays on track?
You want to direct how that meeting's going to go. You don't want the client to kind of go off into a different subject, or maybe talking about something that's totally different. You always want to keep that meeting going in the direction that it was planned, whether it is a listing, whether it is a buyer or a lease, or whatever it is. You want to keep directing that conversation back to the subject, right? And you can do that. People will get off track and start talking about this and that, like, oh, that's great, but what about this? And you want to be in a good mental state at that time, right? And you want to be happy and just make sure that, because conversations can turn negative and people can complain, because that's what people do. They like to complain, and then they want to see what your reaction is. So steer the questions back, get back on subject, and make sure that you're professional about what you're doing, and keep the keep the conversation going on track.
And let's talk about some of these golden rules of communication. I'm just going to reference a few books, reading material that people can find these golden rules in. There's not necessarily a book that's called The Golden Rules of Communication, but the bottom line is there's several resources that we like to share with people that help to get you in a place that you start to understand how powerful communication can be when done the right way. So just mention a few of them. Number one, the 7 levels of communication. That's by Michael Mayer. That's a common staple when we do our trainings. There's another one, bridge builders. And this is something by Maria Keckler that is a little hidden gem. You can find it online or on Amazon, but it's really getting into the bridge that's built with another human being when you're developing relationships, and how once you've built that emotional bridge, you significantly increase your odds of having a lifetime relationship and receiving referrals, and really developing organic business through networks and just building those bridges with other people. The other one is a classic by Gary Chapman, the 5 love languages, and really understanding where people are coming from. Those 5 love languages are broken down into the personality types. And depending on your client's love language, if you can identify it quickly, you could even ask them what that is. I know that's kind of a delicate subject in the middle of a business conversation, but there's ways to figure out which love language they respond to the best. Then you're going to know whether it's acts of service or words of encouragement or gifts or the other love languages that really motivate them and get the response from them. So those are some you can dig into on your own time. And Gary, you've gone through all this material. What were some of the ones that stood out to you that helped with your communication skills?
Yeah, just looking at a list of books that you had talked about. One book that was on there by David Jeremiah, and actually I have a stack of books right now on my desk and also my bedstand of David Jeremiah books. And whether you're Christian or non-Christian, he is the ultimate linguist, and he really knows how to take what was in the Bible and bring it into what's happening in today's world and your life. I recommend any of his books. So, and anybody that's out there that wants a recommendation, feel free to send us a comment. I think I've got every book that was ever published. And there's another one that was at the bottom of the list by Ken Blanchard. Before I was in real estate in the corporate world, that was kind of like a basic book that everybody read, is Who Moved Your Cheese? So sounds funny, which is probably why he made that the title of the book. But pick that one up and read it. That's also it's a small book, easy to read. Yeah, probably finish it within an hour, right, Andrew? It's pretty quick.
Absolutely. Yeah. And David Jeremiah's books, agreed, good friend and amazing individual. A Life Beyond Amazing is one that you could take a look at. Overcomer, another one. I mean, just there's 40 or 50 that he's published over the years, and they just keep getting better and better. Now, there is one also, Emotional Intelligence 2.0, I believe, is what it's called. That's another one. If you've never heard that term, want to go a little deeper to understand what that is, but certainly great resources for you to dive into as well. Okay, let's keep going on our list here. We're on number 6. Remember, number 5 was ask the right questions with those concise questionnaires during the appointment. Number 6 is record the answers and relevant notes in your CRM database. That's your customer relationship management database. And that could be a notepad. It doesn't have to be something, digitally, but whatever that is, there needs to be a place where you're storing these notes to help you recall details and to structure a presentation in step 4 that is specific to your client's needs. And this, again, is where I see people making the biggest mistakes. They have these conversations assuming they're going to remember everything. A week or 2 passes, or sometimes a month, because the person wasn't ready to move forward. And now they have to repeat the appointment. The person on the other end remembers that they already shared this information, and it doesn't look good for you as a professional. So record all the notes in very, very fine detail. This way, when you move to step 4, which is the presentation, this is where you're going to actually pitch your service, whether you're representing a buyer, a seller, an investor, etc. It doesn't matter. There should be a formal presentation for each client type. Well, in order to prepare for that presentation, you need all of these answers. And then number 7, ask your client to express any concerns, questions, objections, or perceived problems they have. So this is one, the fly-by-night salesperson can come in and just, here's what I do, and this is how I do it, and what do you need? Okay, great, I'm going to get it done, and I'm out of here. Rather than just slow down and simply ask, once you've asked your initial questions, do you have any concerns? Do you have any other questions? Is there any objections? I mean, any problems that you see here? You want to know that information. You don't want to sit around hoping it never comes up, because there's always underlying issues, and you want to draw that out of the client. It should be normal problem, answer, solution situation. So number 8 is provide answers and solutions to any concerns, questions, objections, or perceived problems on the spot, and commit to review unresolved issues during the presentation, which is step 4. So most of those concerns and objections, if you're a trained professional, you should be able to handle right there on the spot. But there might be a few that you can't. You don't know that answer right now, and you just simply share that. You don't know it, you'll find out that information. And when you come back to do the formal presentation, you will once again go over those concerns and unresolved issues. Number 9, set a follow-up meeting for the next step that gives you enough time to prepare a customized presentation that meets your client's needs. So when we were training you in step 1 and step 2 to do the initial contact and the follow-up, and then ultimately step 3, which is to get the appointment, that cycle should not end here. Even though you're now established a relationship and you have the presentation upcoming, you should never assume that you'll be able to contact them a week or 2 later, and then they will fall in line and give you another appointment date. So whenever you're wrapping up the appointment, you want to set another appointment, which is for the presentation. And even when you finish your presentation, you want to set another appointment for a decision or for them to start to do the transaction. Setting that follow-up meeting is crucial, with just enough time to give you to prepare. If it's a presentation you've done many times before, you could do it within a couple days. But if it is a significant transaction, you're going to need other colleagues, mentorship. Buy yourself a week. Give yourself plenty of time to prepare, so by the time you come back around, you are able to impress them with your presentation. And number 10, without pressuring your client, create a sense of urgency to review the presentation. You don't want to leave it so open-ended or allow too much time before you go to a presentation, because a competitor can step in and take that business away from you, and they can also lose interest. So you do want to create some sense of urgency, but again, without pressure, so that you keep the ball moving forward. All right, Gary, any comments on those 10 action items? We're going to get into the dependencies next, meaning what do you need in order to carry out those action items? What are you dependent on? But any of those last ones that you want to share, any tips or tricks with the listeners?
Yeah, I think the last one, Andrew, you're talking about not pressuring your client, but you do need to pressure your client. So it's a balance. You want them to know what you're working on, and there is a sense of urgency. And like you said, you want to review the presentation. But if you lose the pressure, and I don't even like to use the word pressure, but if you lose that excitement, then it's almost like a squirrel. They'll see something else and then move on to something different, or maybe someone else different. So use your follow-up skills to keep that keeps yourself ahead of the game.
And there's nothing wrong with sharing with the client that I'm in a highly competitive industry. Most likely you're going to be running into other professionals. They're going to try to sell you their services. Be loyal to me. I mean, being direct with people like that, it's pretty profound, because they're not used to it, and you get to see where they stand. And if you can't get, a formal agreement in place, which we're going to move to when we do the presentation, and then ultimately step 5, which is the agreement. Well, you do want to at least have a word of mouth agreement, right? A verbal commitment, a handshake, a something to let them know that this business is very, very competitive, and people, rightfully so, are going to be looking for your business if you're a great client. So let's dive into the dependencies. And the word dependent, again, is you are dependent on this in order to do that. So these are four things that you're going to need to put in place to carry out the 10 action items that we just discussed. Number one, in order to book an appointment, you need a compelling reason for someone to want to spend their time with you. So as you start to figure out your own value proposition, what you bring to the table, whether it's a buyer or seller, investor, whatever the client type is, you want to have that compelling reason. Once you've discovered that compelling reason, you can use it time and time and time again to attract people and motivate them to want to meet with you. That could be you have an edge in a neighborhood and you know properties that aren't going to hit the market for another month or two because you're in the property management business. That could be you're an expert. If you're a loan officer, you know creative, unique loans that wholesalers offer, and you want to review all the person's options. Whatever that part of your skill set and your intelligence is, it differentiates you from competitors. That needs to be one of the compelling reasons to motivate somebody to spend their time with you. Number two, you need to have your agenda and questions prepared before the appointment so you do not waste your time or the client's time during the appointment. So as we talked about those short, concise questionnaires, you can start with a large one and you can cut it down over time. But the bottom line is you want to guide that conversation. Don't show up without the agenda or without the questionnaires. I know the word agenda has sometimes a negative connotation, like this person has an agenda. But in the business world, remember, an agenda is simply the bullet points of why are we here, and let's stay on track, and let's go through the bullet points on the agenda to make sure our time is used efficiently. So present yourself like a professional, show up with an agenda, hand the copy of the agenda to the other party or bring it on the screen if you're doing virtual conference, and go one by one so that you stay on track. Or again, you can even pull up the questionnaire. There's no shame in showing them the questionnaire and making sure that you're confirming all the answers. Number three, confirm all appointments the day before or the day of your appointment to ensure all parties will show up. People are busy these days. They're inundated. There's so much noise, and everybody's got ADD, whether they want it or not, because of the digital revolution. So people forget or they're late, and your time is valuable, as is theirs. So make sure you get those confirmations the day before, the day of, that morning, whatever it is, just a few hours before, to remind them, for one, and two, to confirm that they're actually going to be there and be there on time. And then number four, the last dependency, if there is more than one decision maker for the transactions, be sure to have all of them show up for the appointment. Boy, did I learn this lesson early on in my career the hard way. I would meet with a wife or a husband and develop a relationship. Everything was going fine. And then when it came time to either move forward with the transaction or put together agreements or bring that other spouse into the picture, I was in for a big surprise. That person was not on the same page. The other person was the decision maker, and I'd spent all my time developing the relationship with the wrong person. So making sure all decision makers are present for that initial appointment is super critical. Gary, lots of things to cover here in the dependencies. What are your thoughts, or what are some tips and tricks you can share?
Yeah, when you were talking about number three, about confirming the appointment, Andrew, gosh, I can't tell you. Sometimes I'll confirm it the day before, that day, in emails, texts. And I remember this was just last week. I was sitting in my car. I'm like, wow, it's getting late. And I, checked in with the client. Oh, geez, that was today. I thought you said Friday. Like, no, I think I reminded you several times, but you just kind of have to get past that and say, oh, no problem. Let's reschedule. Let me see if I can fit it in for Friday. So confirming appointments is huge, especially if you don't want to waste gas driving all over your territory, and wasting the time sitting in a car thinking that you had an appointment with somebody. So confirm, reconfirm over and over. You're not pestering somebody because your time is valuable. So make sure that you do that.
You got it. Well, let's wrap up with some best practices, some bullet points here to remind us of what we should be doing when it comes to these appointments. Number one, define your intent. Number two, master your script. Number three, use the power of words. Number four, speak truth and be joyful. Number five, practice over and over. Number six, learn to handle objections. Number seven, present yourself professionally. And number eight, become a magnet by being friendly. So that wraps up step 3. We hope this series is blessing you. Get ready for step 4 as we embark on part 2 of the 7 steps to powerful paychecks journey. We'll see you on the next episode.